Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Welcome to the Gameweek 17 pod of the FPL Wire. We are back. I'm your host, Zofa. My co-host, Late Riser, and I are joined by some guy who insisted on being on the pod. How are you, Mr. Stranger?
Thanks for having me, Zoff. It's been a while. So I've almost forgotten what podding was like, to be very honest. I mean, it's almost like a new season. I don't think we've ever actually gone that long without speaking to each other. Um, I'm very glad that FPL is back. I've taken a couple of days to get back up to speed, but I'm really looking forward to the discussion tonight. How about you guys?
What about you, LR?
Yeah, doing good. FPL was just very, very happy to see Bucker's face because I think it's been a while since the three of us actually potted together. So
Yes.
just happy to be back amongst friends. Yeah. Looking forward to the pod, feeling in a very comfortable place with my template now. Just have to wait for what happens in terms of news that we get in terms of press conferences in the Carabao Cup. But outside of that, doing good. Bucker, how did you spend the break though? What's been up? I mean, haven't heard from you at all. Things might have been keeping you busy.
Not as such, really. I mean, I was just occupied with the World Cup, doing some content, writing some articles. Other than that, playing football, hanging out, chilling with friends, the usual.
The usual.
Nothing that you want to hear or might be interested to hear.
Zoff tells me you've been attending a few weddings and must be a few rishtas in the inbox.
A few of my friends getting married, yes. And like that does sort of increase the pressure on me as well, with especially when my parents see people around me getting married. They're like, oh, people around you are getting married. What are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm enjoying my life. No need to worry.
And no dance videos. Oh, going to weddings and not sending us dance videos is criminal.
I actually didn't dance, to be very honest, in any of the weddings, but I will as soon as I do. There's still a few to attend.
Speaking of dancing, 3-0 series whitewash. Your comments on the cricket and your illustrious captain, Mr. Babar Azam.
What do you want me to say? I mean, whatever I have to say, I can't really say it out live on in public on YouTube. It's not for public viewing. I don't rate him as a captain at all, and like it's just embarrassing to see us get humiliated like this. Fair play to England, but we just deserve this for playing the boring brand of cricket that we do.
Are you ready for FPL, Bakar?
Sorry?
Are you ready? Do you feel ready for FPL to get right into it?
Yes, for sure.
Nice.
Especially after the farce that was the World Cup fantasy. I'm looking forward to having a much better game back in my life.
You guys want to take a couple of minutes to talk about the final that we witnessed? I mean, what a game. Everything that you could ask for from a single game of football, like we could see there. Zoff, thoughts on the final?
It was a great game, but up till the 78th minute, I would say it wasn't even a game. But so the ending of it was fantastic. And Emi Martinez, man, I love that guy. He's such a hero for me, and I just love everything. It was like as soon as it went to penalty shootout, like that's it. Messi's got the trophy. Legend.
Yes, we got a good crowd watching us, about 200, 220 in already, which has been a while since we've had such a crowd, especially since it's been off season. So if you guys are watching us, please make sure you're hitting the like button and the subscribe button because it helps us with the algorithm. And let's get into the sponsor plugs off.
Yep, and then jump in. It might be a long pod today. Looking forward to it. Let's go. All data you see on the FPL Wire is taken from the Fantasy Football Scout members area. The new improved members area is now up and running, and the new comparison tool lets you compare key stats for up to 3 players. Player projections are also live, and as always, you can access the custom stats table we create or make one for yourself. Sign up for membership today using our affiliate link in the description below. Right. Before we get into nitty-gritties of team selections, player dilemmas, let's discuss some macro points. We have a bit of an agenda prepared. LR, do you have that up in front of you?
Yeah, I do have that up in front of me. And first thing we want to take into conversation is how much do you value the previous 16 game weeks of data? Like, what do you take into account? What do you not take into account? Pakar, what are your thoughts there?
It does sort of tend to tell me which teams are doing well, which have pedigree, which can be relied on. For example, when you look at the XGC data, City and Arsenal are by far the defenses which performed well in the first half of the season. And yes, that trend is kind of likely to continue, I would imagine, over the course of the remaining 19 game weeks. So it does add some value, but to be honest, this is like a new season. I mean, there is no form. I'm not really going to suggest sort of tripling up on Arsenal just because they have good data, because things are likely to change. For example, the impact of Jesus' injury is something we need to consider. And there are quite a few players. For example, Spurs have had quite a few players who've progressed deeper in the tournament. Richarlison is injured. Whether or not, they will start well from the blocks, I'm not really sure. I think it does add value, but only to a certain extent. I won't read too much into it, to be very honest.
It's like what we were
Off.
discussing earlier. It's not irrelevant, but it's less relevant. And it's
Yeah.
more different team by team. Like Bakar said, Arsenal, it's a bit less relevant. Chelsea, maybe Potter ball gets going, it's a bit less relevant. It's certain teams have new managers, Southampton, Wolves, Villa. So there's a lot that can be learned, I think, in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think what really the whole thing is very subjective. But if you do want to take data into account, I think clubs where things haven't changed too much, I think you can take data forward into account. Like Chelsea, for example, I think is on the lower end scale of how relevant the previous 16 game weeks are in terms of Potter finally getting a month to think about what he wants to do with this team. He's got Reece James fit now. He's got Fofana fit now, players that he didn't have earlier. So, we know that Chelsea have quality in their team. Are they going to perform better? That's something which I don't think the data will tell us. It comes down to your intuition and your subjective perception of how Chelsea are. Clubs like City, where not much is going to change or not much has changed.
Yes.
I don't think. I think the previous 16 game weeks data matters. Clubs like Fulham, etc. Especially the lower end spectrum of the clubs where they don't have too many players playing in the World Cup, not many managerial shifts. I think the last 16 game week data comes into play. Like a team like Fulham, we know that they are really good in attack. That stays. So it depends on the stability factor at the club.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Next thing that we had on the agenda is when we're building this team, and assuming all of us don't really want to wildcard very early after this free wildcard of sorts, how much emphasis do you actually put on double game weeks? Zoff, I'll come to you first.
This is an interesting question because we had discussed this a lot last year, right? We would rather pick good players from good teams, not players who just have a double. And what's interesting is most of the doubles now this time just involve adding Man City. Chelsea double has an extra fixture against Man City, so does Arsenal, so does Spurs. You could look at it as just the original game plus 2 points. So I don't think we should get carried away. I think you should invest, but usually we like to max out with like triples and doubles and all that stuff. I don't think we should be doing that. But that being said, the doubles are from good teams this time. There's Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, and Man City. So some investment is warranted, I think, especially at Man City. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Man City players would have been in your team irrespective. So I'm with you. I think Man City sort of having at least two, because if you're not sure about the third asset, it's sort of like a no-brainer to make sure you have those three. But again, like you mentioned, and it's something I haven't mentioned on the excellent above average FPL pod as well. It's not like we're getting tunneled into picking players from Wolves or NFO or Southampton in our teams based on double game weeks. These are top 6 sides that you're essentially going to pick. You're going to pick players from Fulham who've been good for attack throughout the season. So I think there is a fair amount of weightage that you can give because the teams playing the doubles have fairly high potential. Even Chelsea for that matter, because it's just not the doubles, it's the fixtures around for Chelsea as well. Bournemouth and Forest to start with, Fulham and Palace after, and then Fulham again in 22. So, if somebody fancies taking a punt on a Chelsea attacker, if there is one we can find, I'm not against the idea. Bakar?
Yes, you've covered it. Essentially, the main point is that the good teams have the double, so it's not as if you're loading up just for the sake of attacking the doubles anyway. So, for example, even someone like a Mitrovic or Pereira, they're known to be good assets. I mean, even Chelsea, as you mentioned, they're playing Forest and Bournemouth right after the break. So it's not just attacking the doubles when you look at it. I think that it's perfectly fine if you're buying these teams. Even if they didn't have a double, I think I would have gone there.
Yeah. What players do you think people might be ignoring, like from the double game? Because I don't see many Spurs assets in teams. What are your thoughts there?
It's essentially because Kane is the obvious pick, but you would rather have someone like a Salah or De Bruyne, and that's personally my thought. I would rather go for someone like that over Kane. Plus the fact that he's on 4 yellows as well, so you never know that he might even miss a game as well at some point. Kulusevski is the only one that actually interests me. I am not interested in the defense because Conte does tend to rotate his fullbacks, and their the defensive numbers aren't that great anyways. If like 16th or 17th for shots conceded and 6th or 7th for XGC conceded as well. So It's just Kulusevski, and he has been a good asset, but I think as of now, I would rather have someone like a Foden than go to Kulusevski.
Zoff, you not had or considered any Spurs assets. What are your thoughts there? You had a fairly strong opinion on Kulusevski because there was a fair amount of love in the community, but you were not particularly feeling it.
I don't know about Kulusevski. He seems to me a bit more of a creator than a scorer. This might change. Obviously, he's a very good player, but just seems to me a little bit low ceiling. I don't know. And like, I'm not that bullish on Spurs because, as Bakar mentioned at the outset, they had a lot of players who went deep into the World Cup. You have Perisic and Lloris, who will probably be missing. Bentancur, who's been very big for them in their midfield. He's out injured for a few weeks. It's all going to be the Kane, Son, Kulusevski thing again.
Not just the Zoff. When you look at their fixtures, they have Brentford to begin with away from home, which is an okayish fixture. Yeah, exactly. Then Villa under Emery, I think they will be better. Then Crystal Palace away, which is almost always a tough nut to crack. And then in the double, it's not really a double because they're playing two of the best defenses in the league in Arsenal and Man City. So I'm not really sure about their fixtures as well. Regardless of the fact that they have a double, I don't think I will go there. I'm not really tempted by Kulusevski, and he's the only realistic option I see, to be very honest.
And Kane, of course. Kane is always a realistic option. I mean, a lot of people have spoken, and we're going to have some premium chat later. But there's nothing wrong with Harry Kane as a pick, objectively speaking, I reckon. It's just who you prefer in the premium bracket, and all three of us have other players who we prefer as things stand.
Exactly.
And one big point, when you're building your team also, this is just wanted to ask you, Zoff, when do you foresee yourself using the wildcard?
I would say around game week 30-ish, the more of the traditional use was what we usually do. Let's just to give a quick introduction to someone who's just getting into FPL first time about how the double game weeks are laid out. So 19th, the Chelsea double is confirmed, but the double for City in 20 is contingent to neither City or Spurs requiring a replay in the FA Cup. And the other double is for Arsenal and Man City in 23rd. That's a confirmed one. And there's a curveball here. There could be some additional doubles thrown in as well in 21 and 22, depending on the Carabao Cup fixtures. If there are two teams that are eliminated from the Carabao Cup, they have a fixture against each other to be scheduled. That could get thrown in on very short notice. So we should know more on that by the weekend. Hopefully by the deadline, we should have some idea on that.
And Manchester United are an important factor here as well because they have the most number of games to be scheduled. So, that could be a new piece of information we get before deadline as well.
Cool.
And so the point I was trying to make with regards to this is, because very rarely do we have such an opportunity where we're getting essentially a free wildcard around game week 17, which you can play for a period of, I'm assuming we want to have that team for 10 to 15 game weeks is what we are all aiming for. Of course, it could be a situation where we get everything wrong and all the assumptions that we made are wrong and we might have to wildcard earlier. But if you can help it, we all want to save our wildcard until the game week 28 to 30 bracket as well, which is why what you do want to do is try to build your team a little bit for the long term. There should be 10 or 12 spots in there that you're comfortable holding irrespective of fixtures.
Absolutely. Should we move on to Chelsea?
Yeah. One more macro question actually, Zoff, because there's a lot of people who haven't really had a good start. And, we're getting a ton of these questions in the Discord as well in terms of how do you set up to gain rank from a bad position? If you guys don't mind, I want to go on this first because a couple of years ago, I had a really bad season. And what I was trying to do is shortcut my way. And that led to me falling behind. And, we've seen a few people trying this and it's not really going to work. It's what you have to do is, I went on the FPL pod before the season started. And the ideology should be play like you don't know your rank, dance like no one's watching. Because I feel like opportunities will be greater a little later into the season. You can't really punt too much right now because it's almost like game week 1. You're building a team sort of blind. So it's almost better to go with known quantities if you want to punt maybe a spot or two. But I don't think you need to go berserk, crazy, trying to gain rank this early in the season. What are your thoughts, Zoff?
I think that you have to pick and choose your battles. Don't try to go against Haaland, for example. But I think you can, for example, go against Salah. Salah's EO is anyway not going to be that high. But certain players, let's say like Martinelli. We look at Arsenal, their fixtures look slightly difficult. We don't know how his role is going to change with Jesus out. Maybe oppose Martinelli there. Almiron right now is close to, I think, 35-40% ownership. You can take that on. pick and choose your battles. I would say, like, if the template is a solid 11, you can keep about 6 to 7 players and distinguish in the other 4 spots.
And also, I think there's a big difference here. We don't actually really know the template because people might not have the engaged managers haven't really clicked the buttons as yet. So, what you're seeing is probably a collection of 50, 100 teams on Twitter or amongst YouTube managers. But outside of that, it could be a very tiny bubble. I think as FPL managers, because of the fact that we have free transfers and people aren't really going to change their teams and make transfers until maybe Sunday. How confident are you of knowing the template either?
Bakar?
I don't think it's the time to go points chasing this early. I still think there's a lot of football to be played, and especially later on when the doubles kick in and the big doubles kick in, the swings are there for everyone to see. And we have seen it in the past. You can make up like 50, 60 points in like 2 or 3 weeks. That's how the double game weeks work. I think it's too early, especially with the chips to come as well, to start taking unnecessary risks. I think you just pick whichever team you think is best at this point in time and forget about the rank. And then, as Zoff said, you tend to then later on pick and choose the battles. And then, depending on how much rank you're chasing, you can take more risks later on the season.
I mean, Zoff mentioned you pick and choose the battles right now, and I agree with it. I mean, I just want to come to you guys with a question here. If you had to pick a battle right now, who would you bet against? And the first answer that comes to me is making sure KDB is in my team because he's got 2 great fixtures to start with and potentially 2 doubles later. And I don't know if he's going to be very highly owned, but you go there as an option. Any other places where you think you can make ground on the field?
Arsenal.
Zoff?
Arsenal would be right up there for me
Yes.
because of the Jesus factor, and the fixtures are difficult. We look at Chase. Let's just switch there right now. I'm just going to mention in terms of XGC. Now, this data is from FPL Chase on Twitter. This is a non-penalty XG. This is the attack. Now we'll just switch over to defense. The top teams on there are Arsenal, West Ham, Man City, Brighton, Newcastle, and United. Arsenal play around, I think, 3 or 4 of these teams in the first 5 fixtures. So there is a case to back against Arsenal. I'm not saying they're going to be rubbish overnight, but it doesn't look like 4 or 5 goals are going to be scored over this run.
Agree with you.
Yes, and most of those teams are in the top half of XG as well. So you can actually bet against an Arsenal defender if you want as well. That's also an option.
Any other bets that you like, or maybe a punt that you like for people who are rank chasing at the moment, Bakar?
I was going to say Arsenal, to be very honest. I mean, White, Martinelli, these are the 2 that stand out, especially Martinelli with his ownership, Saka with his ownership. I actually think Salah will be lesser owned than KDB. So that's another way of making up rank. I don't think Salah and Nunes will both be as highly owned, the combo of them. So, yeah, other than that, I think most of the teams pick themselves.
Where are you on Almiron, Bakar? Do you think we can take that position on? How do you feel about him as an asset?
He's just incredible value at 5.8 million. I mean, I was reading up on the stats as well. His stats are actually good. Yes, he's overperformed his expected goals tally, but in the mids, when you look at the mids, he's among the top 5 for shots in the box, 6 for big chances, 6 for XG. Those numbers are actually decent, and that's very good for someone who's ranked, whose price is just 6 million. And when you look at Newcastle, they're 4th for minutes per XG this season, and the numbers are actually so good that they suggest, especially the home numbers, they suggest that their form is actually sustainable. So at 5.8 million, I just think he's too good to pass. So he's like one of those guys, you sort of have him, as you mentioned, you're making a team for the long run. You just put him in there and forget about him for, let's say, 6-8 weeks, and then reassess him after that, depending on how he's performing.
What do you guys think about Cancelo? We have Pras and Sachin in the chat saying going against Cancelo comes to their mind when you're talking about taking against the template, taking a bet against the template. I mean, it's something I did earlier in the season where I didn't own him for a period of 6 to 7 game weeks. But I feel like with potentially 2 doubles for Man City coming as well as those fixtures, I think it's a very risky gamble to make. It could plummet because his ownership is going to be very high, and I think his points potential is very high as well. So do you agree? Do you like that as a battle you pick on?
The thing is, I would probably do that. City wasn't like having so many doubles. The problem is now with the doubles, either you're going to get Foden there in that spot, and there's no other third City guy you can really go for, right? They
Yeah.
can't go for your Akanji, Stones, and all that stuff. So you probably do that if you're going to bet against it with Foden. If they didn't have these doubles, I'd have a look at Cancelo.
Yeah. Bakar, do you agree?
It's not just the doubles as well. It's also the fact that Pep has spoken in the past as to how Cancelo is. He's supremely fit. He recovers very quickly, and with games coming in quick succession, you want a piece of the Man City defense. And even if I have to pay extra for it, that's fine. I know that Cancelo hasn't been as attacking as he usually is, but I mean, there's always potential there. He's still first for penalty area touches, even though the creativity and goal threat have gone down. But there's potential there to be targeted, and I personally think it's too big of a risk going without him.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that statement because the ceiling is very high as a pick, especially with potentially 2 doubles incoming.
I'm not too concerned about him. And worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, you can, if Liverpool are fighting, you can swap to someone like a Trent or Robertson later on.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually, if people want potential point gainers, people who don't have that much ownership at high point ceiling, I think going early in on a Trent or a Robbo isn't a bad idea, especially because the big factor here is, in my opinion, Matip is fit. He's played a couple of preseason friendlies, and Van Dijk paired with Matip is a much better combo than Gomez playing in that position. Konate is fit as well. So, and you have to think that Klopp's been thinking about this in terms of, Liverpool are conceding way too many chances. He might want to stabilize that. Like, we're all struggling with that 8 million mid position in terms of not having a clear option there. We're playing around with Kulu, Madison, etc. You can go a little cheaper there and invest in a Trent for that position, because the point ceiling is always there. Again, it comes down to that conversation we are having at the start of the pod in terms of what do you take from the data of the first 16 game weeks into the second part of the season. I think Liverpool might improve defensively because Matip is playing, and I think he's a key cog in that midfield, so in that defense. So I don't mind a punt on a Trent or Robbo to start off with. What do you think, Sof?
Fixtures are very strange for Liverpool. They have only 2 home games in the first 6, and I think it's only like 4 in the first 9 or something like that. It's a very lopsided thing. And you always look at Liverpool as a much better team, obviously, at Anfield. But if you do want to go there, I would go Robbo over Trent. From what we've seen, that he's a little bit scared to expose Trent defensively. Trent has been deeper, and Robbo has been playing more on the left. And with Nunes, I've noticed Nunes is always cutting inside. So Robbo is getting a lot more forward. I think the link up with Nunes there is a big factor in Robbo's favor. But the main problem for me is I would have liked a lot more home games for Liverpool.
Yes.
Fair shout.
They're much better at home defensively as compared to away.
Cool. Next up on the agenda, we have the 4th defender conversation. General, there's a United versus Arsenal conversation when you're looking at an 8 million midfielder, whether you're looking at Martinelli versus Rashford, or whether you're looking at a four defender. But let's talk about these clubs. White versus Dalot or Shaw. Where are you guys leaning towards at the moment?
Yes, I have quite a few points to make on this. Firstly, you mentioned that we're making a team for the long run. And it's not just about the next 4 or 5 weeks, right? So even though United have better fixtures in the short term, over the next 10 or 12 weeks, I would rather have someone like a White, which is why I have White over, let's say, Dalot or Shaw in my draft number 1. The second point is that Varane and Lisandro are unlikely to be available for the opening fixtures, which makes United a worse defense, right? The third point is that White also has a double coming up in Gameweek 23. And the fourth point is that a lot of us have Trippier in our drafts, and Newcastle have Arsenal away in 19. And that's a fixture I would potentially want him to be benched for. And you can play White in that fixture. He covers them very well.
I wouldn't bench Trippier.
What are your thoughts?
Firstly, I would say just remember what a beast Trippier is. Don't bench Trippier in any fixture. So there, but
Arsenal at home are a team I'd expect to score.
Irrelevant. He can
even
score a
against
free
Newcastle.
kick set piece. Trippier is a monster. Never bench Trippier.
I'm
That's
so
fine,
glad
but
you're
his ceiling
saying
is
this
low.
off. I'm so glad you're saying this because I remember we were having a lot of conversation around the Game Week 8
I didn't
World Cup.
mention. I didn't mention him in any of the earlier fixtures, but I just think Arsenal away is a very tough fixture for someone like him.
Yeah. No, but it's quite a big deal that Zoff's come around to this because around the Game Week 8 pod, I remember Zoff where Newcastle had a poor pair of fixtures right after the wildcard, and you were like, this X player will cover Trippier in this game, and X-Player will cover Trippier in this game. And you realize what his impact is, and I'm with you on that. I just don't think you bench Trippier. He's a perma play. He's the defense equivalent, a defense premium equivalent of James Ward-Prowse. You just play him. As simple as that.
He's
His
like
returns are
the
unpredictable.
TA of previous seasons. You just play him every week and
Yeah.
nick a double-digit haul against anyone. And Newcastle, again, orientation is required. Newcastle today, I think, are as good a team as Arsenal.
Yep, agree. And especially in defense. You might argue that Arsenal have a better attack, but in defense, I don't think you can split between the two.
Correct. Now, getting back to the question, I quite like White because I'm likely going in with James, Cancelo, Trippier, which is going to be quite popular. And the thing is, so the first 3 fixtures, I might not really require them. And the fixtures down the line after that are quite better for Arsenal. So it's just a sort of set and forget. And White is not dull anymore. I know I often pick on White for being the dull option, but he gets forward a lot now. He's getting those penalty box touches, a few shots, his link up with Saka is there. He's good for bonus. So he's no longer 6-point dull Ben White. He can get the 8 to 12 pointer as well. So for me, I'm quite set on White as that 4th spot.
Zoff, do you prefer White to someone like a Gabriel, even if you have the additional funds?
We discussed this on the draft video. Now, if Gabriel was going to be my 3rd defender, I would probably do that. But as a 4th defender, I don't think that warrants spending that extra 0.6, 0.7, whatever it is.
Yes, that extra money that you might have in the bank might be needed later down the line.
Yeah, in my opinion, the reason I'd probably pick White is just the double. But if I had to compare apples to apples, objectively speaking, I think Dalot's a much better pick than Ben White. I mean, there is clean sheet potential, but when it comes to bonus points potential and when it comes to attacking potential, I think Dalot's clear of White. And then there is the fact that I think United's trajectory is very positive. And with no distractions in the team anymore, I think we're going to come well. But we do have a double game week, and you boys make a good point in terms of we don't really need a 4th defender, depending on what formation you're playing. Right now, we're talking about our team where we don't need a 4th defender. But if there is a position where you're going with 2 4.5 million defenders and you need a 4th defender, maybe you think differently. But yeah.
But Pranil, just to play devil's advocate, do you really think the double for Arsenal is a consideration, keeping in mind that one of those fixtures is against City?
Yeah, you make a good point because it's not very likely that they will keep a clean sheet in that game. The problem is also we don't know if Dalot's fit. Like I'm expecting an update today or tomorrow when it comes to his fitness because he did walk off gingerly after that. And if he's not fit, then we have 3 out of our 4 starting choice defenders unfit for the game week, and then it just becomes a no conversation at the moment. So we have to wait for information. But if Dalot is fit, I think Dalot's a better pick than White. I'll not sit on the fence here.
I think Arsenal are better. I think White's a better pick because I think Arsenal are a better defense as well. It sort of levels out the whole bonus point thing.
Yeah.
I know United's numbers improved considerably towards the end, but I think Arsenal are just an elite defense. The numbers are crazy. They're not exactly mentioned over here, but the numbers are very similar to that of City.
Yep. Cool. I just gave my points because the thing is also, when we're hitting a clean sheet, Dalot is either 2 or 3 bonus. Like he's very high in terms of the dribbling stats, etc. that he has as well. So yeah, just wanted to not sit on the fence there. What about Rashford versus Martinelli? Zoff, you were on Martinelli before we spoke, but I think your opinions changed. Where are you with that right now?
Now, someone in the Discord, Yash, pointed this out to us. Now, against Forest, there's no Dean Henderson in goal against his parent club. So that's a big plus for Rashford in my eyes. And Rashford has a high ceiling. With your boy Ronaldo gone, which you were very upset about, it's okay. I understand. Don't be too upset. So I think he works a lot better with Martial. I think he's going to get played in a lot more. But again, to play the devil's advocate, as Bakar said, how do you think he's going to do against deep blocks? I think, but Martial's interplay makes me a bit more confident, right? Against those deep blocks, because Martial does those 1-2 passes. If it was Ronaldo, then be like Ronaldo's just going to be sitting in the center, hogging all the chances. Is not bad. Is bad for Rashford. But with Martial, I'm a lot more confident.
Yeah, and it's also we used to struggle on one side where we were playing Elanga or Bruno on one wing before because Anthony was injured for a while as well. He's back fit as well. So essentially speaking, you have our first choice front 6 fit and going to be playing for United. You have Rashford, Martial, Anthony, Bruno, Eriksen, and Casemiro, and that's just a very good front six. So I'm bullish. I don't think there are any problems going with one or two United attackers.
And also, he might get a few minutes up front. I don't count Marshall to get 90 minutes across all 3 games in a week with your boy Garnacho.
Yeah, especially with exactly.
Baka?
So yeah,
I just like the vibe around Man United at this point in time with Ronaldo gone and United having looked much better for the World Cup. I think they will do really well, especially with the fixtures now in their favor. And Rashford is someone who's more or less nailed in my draft and has been since I started tinkering. So I think I look at him as a very high ceiling pick. So if I was comparing him with someone like a Martinelli, I prefer him simply because of the fixtures that United have.
yeah. And while we're United, I think it's worth mentioning because I've seen a lot of drafts on Twitter and a lot of people, going for Bruno Fernandes because they think he's going to be the man. I did feel like I needed to mention this is that under Ten Hag, Bruno is not playing as the 10 he was playing under Solskjaer. Like Bruno was in the box as a second striker, always when he was playing under Solskjaer, that was his role. He isn't as forward playing under Ten Hag. He is more like an advanced state in that United team. And I do feel like there's more goal scoring responsibility amongst Rashford, Marshall, and Anthony in this United team. So, I've seen a lot of people saying that, no Ronaldo. So straight up makes Bruno the main man. I'm not quite confident about that perception. I think there are 3 better picks in United's attack if you want to go there.
I'd agree. It's too much of a price, I think, to take a punt on. When you have Rashford at
exactly.
around 3 million cheaper.
And it's just watching United as well, right? He isn't, because everybody's perception is Bruno is that second striker, is what his role was under Solskjaer. Under Ten Hag, he does take on a little more creative responsibility. He does what he wants, but he's not your ancillary second striker. So everybody's expecting that, automatic Ronaldo's gone. Bruno's going to give you what he gave you 2 seasons ago. I don't think that's going to happen.
Cool. Move on.
Yep.
What's up next? Chelsea?
Chelsea, I think. Yeah, I think we should talk about the teams off.
Let me bring up the slide.
Yeah.
So I'll just go through Chelsea's schedule first before we analyze them. The first game against Bournemouth is on the 27th. We play Forest on the 1st and Man City on the 5th. That's not too bad. If you look at that 4th to 5th, this is effectively the games are spread out over 8 to 9 days. So it's quite feasible that most assets like your Mount, etc. could play all 3 games. Now the FA Cup game is 3 days later and then the Fulham game is 4 days later. So this is effectively the double game week is going to be on 5th Jan and 12th Jan. So you could have the likes of James possibly sit out the FA Cup. I'm quite confident he's not going to prioritize the Cup as much. We're going to see a lot because we saw something similar in the Carabao Cup as well. We played very much a second string side. So there's a good chance a lot of these assets could play both games in the double. Then the fixtures, like we discussed, around them are quite good. Now let's have a quick look at the data for the last 6 game weeks. And now, again, this should be taken with a pinch of salt because we had James and Chilwell injured. And in general, the team was very downbeat. The team was quite tired. Potter ball hadn't really taken effect. We looked at Havertz was playing up top at that time. He's top for expected goal involvement. But the player I wanted to look at more closely is Mason Mount. He's playing a very different role under Potter where he's playing a lot deeper. Now look at his underlying numbers. In 6 appearances, he's had just 3 shots in the box and XG non-penalty of 0.56, which includes the pass which Mings made to him to get Gerrard sacked. So, and the chances created also just 3 in 6 games. Those are very, very poor numbers. So, picking Mount feels like the classic picking up player just for the reason he has a double game week. So I don't know. The fixtures are there, right? You look at the games they're playing. You're playing the 3 promoted teams back to back. It feels wrong not having an attacker, but it's at the same time, it feels picking one just for the sake of it. Where are you boys on it?
I mean, I want you to point me towards an attacker that's worth taking a gamble on. That's not named Mason Mount.
Sterling?
Like a Pulisic or a Sterling or a Havertz. Is there anybody out there that, let's say I insisted that you tell me to pick somebody if I want to punt when it comes to a Chelsea attacker, who would be your pick? Just if you had to roll the dice.
Probably Sterling.
Probably Sterling. You reckon he plays in the front three? No scope for playing that wing back position again?
No, I don't think I really don't see him playing in the wing back role again. But what is interesting here is the form of Pulisic and Ziyech at the World Cup.
Exactly.
They've really shown that they deserve minutes, they deserve to be starting. Now Ziyech played till quite late, so he might miss the entire festive schedule. But Pulisic was back, so you could expect Pulisic to get minutes, and hopefully they won't be at left wing back or right wing back. So that's sort of a curveball there. Now we had an injury also to Broya in this second preseason, so that makes Oba's minutes also a bit more secure. We don't have really any competition. And in midfield now, I think we have RLC injured. We have Kovacic who won't be there for the festive schedule. We're going to have to play most likely a midfield three of Gallagher, Jorginho, and Mount. One of those guys is probably going to be attacking. I'm not sure which one. Gallagher could emerge as an option, but no confidence there.
So if you had to pick one, it's Sterling, you reckon?
I think if I had to go on, definitely it's Sterling.
Fair enough. And what are your thoughts on, I mean, this is the conversation we're having, assuming that James and Kepa are in for both of us. Bakar, are you on the same page with Reece James and Kepa? Sort of have to be in your team, given the fixtures and the double?
Yes. If we hear positive news regarding them in the press conference, then sure. I think both of them are kind of obvious picks, especially with the fixtures and the double which is coming up.
So Chelsea don't have a Carabao Cup game, but there is a behind closed doors friendly. I'm not sure. I think it's today or tomorrow. So we should get some minutes, but I don't know if the starting lineup there will necessarily be the starting, because he's going to want to give players minutes who just came back.
What do you think about Fofana, Zozov? He's 4.3 million. No, we don't do eggs and baskets here on the FPL Wire. 4.3 million is a ridiculous price for a starting Chelsea defender who might have a double. What do you think about that?
I don't think he's going to start regularly. I see him being rotated in and out of the side for Thiago Silva.
All right. Fair enough. Adam's asking us if we can go to those XG and XGC charts because he's not convinced about Chelsea. That's the point we're trying to make in terms of what do we take from the previous 16 game weeks. And Chelsea is one of those subjective things where we're not sure we want to take that data into consideration because new manager and a couple of more players fit and back and a couple of informed World Cup players who weren't really a part of the starting 11 setup now going to be under consideration as well. So that's where we are with Chelsea.
Fixtures breed form. That's what we always say. Right? It's just purely a fixture play.
Yeah. And eventually it comes down to, do you rate the players that Chelsea have? I'm not quite sure of their attackers, but I do rate Potter and I do think he'll get it right.
That's what I am as well.
We have seen that Kepa was doing well even under Potter. He was performing well, and James does have pedigree. It's not as if we're just basing these players on fixtures alone. That they do have some kind of pedigree. Mount is the one which is questionable because he actually only has 3 returns so far. But again, he's the one who's most likely to start. So where else do you go? The one thing I like about Mount is that he allows an easy way to Foden if you are not exactly sure whether Foden will start in Gameweek 17 and you want to get him with a double later, then you can have Mount till Gameweek 19 and book that transfer in for Gameweek 20.
I just see him doing a lot more dirty work with Kovacic out in the midfield. He's going to have to do a lot of tracking back and defensive work.
So who is your pick? Jorginho, I think?
Yeah, Jorginho is on pens.
All right. And if he doesn't start, do we know who might take pens? Like is Oba or Sterling?
I don't think Mount has taken one, but I would guess Oba, being the forward, he used to take them at his previous clubs. He'd want to take them.
All right. Cool.
Where do we go next?
Right. Next, we have premiums outside of Erling Haaland. Where are you with that?
Let me just go back to the data. Let's have that handy while we discuss this. So Liverpool, right? Liverpool are up there. In fact, we have a 3-way tie at top: Arsenal, Liverpool, and Man City. Spurs are a little bit further down with 1.4. But like you mentioned on the last pod, LR, what we've seen so far is Kane's floor. When Spurs have been playing poorly, these are the returns Kane has been getting. So who knows? And how do you think he's going to react? Do you think he's going to be down after the whole penalty miss, or he's going to come back with a vengeance, try to get over it?
Everything that I've heard from Spurs fans, especially Baker, as he's a little bit of a mental beast. I don't think it's going to affect him at all. I think he's going to come back with a vengeance. I don't think the mental side of things is going to be a problem for Kane.
Bakar?
I won't be worried.
Yeah, I think he'll continue to take along as well. It's just that I don't expect Spurs to hit the ground running. I think they will continue to play in a similar fashion which they were before the World Cup, and Kane will continue to take along. But again, at that price, I expect more.
Let's talk about KDB's numbers, right? He's up there for expected goal involvement, but 3 big chances all season and just 2.5 XG. Very much an assister. His price, I think, of 12 is sort of factored in his goal scoring from last year. I don't think you're going to see him scoring braces. He's obviously capable of scoring those worldies from outside of the box, but it very much seems to me like a 6 to 9 pointer. He might get those every week. Obviously, he's feeding the best striker in the league. But Salah now playing that central role, which is likely going to happen more now with Firmino, Darwin, Salah being the likely front three, is very hard to pass up because Salah can go bank 21 points in any of the first 3-4 fixtures.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you'd expect someone like KDB to get like 6 to 8 points, 9 points in every fixture. That he will continue to take along for sure, especially with City's fixtures. But again, he does not have that hat-trick potential that Salah has, and Salah can easily, especially he's well rested, and given the position he's likely playing closer to goal, you'd expect him to have a higher ceiling. But again, the counter argument to this is the City double that they have coming up.
It's not just the double, it's also the fixtures that City have at the top. I mean, they have Leeds and Everton to start with. You compare that to Liverpool, and they've got Villa and Leicester, and then Brentford away. So the fixtures are also on City's side, outside of the double.
Villa don't have Martinez, though. Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, but still,
is that confirmed? Is that confirmed?
Bro, yeah. I would be shocked. I don't think he knows where he is right now. You see the video, they're still celebrating in Argentina. I think they're going to go on till the end of the week. So I don't think there's any chance Martinez is making it back for Boxing Day.
Yeah, that's it. There is a considerable, just the point that we're trying to make here is there's a considerable difference in fixtures. That said, I just think now that Klopp has learned his lesson and Salah is going to be an inside forward rather than a touchline hogging winger, he has the capacity and capability to match Haaland as an FPL asset or come close to Haaland as an FPL asset. I don't see that with KDB, and that's the bet I'm willing to make at the moment. And outside of that, I think if the expected minutes for KDB and Foden were similar, Foden is a better FPL asset. So I'm willing to play the waiting game to see if Foden is likely going to be fit or playing by the time Gameweek 20 arrives, and then make my bet there.
See, this is it, right? If Foden looks to be the better pick by, let's say, Gameweek 18, 19, and if you have KDB, you're sort of stuck.
Correct. So I think we're all in the same boat. You keep the option.
You want to give yourself the flexibility of picking the better one, right? Either you begin with Foden or you ignore both of them and then wait and see and then move to the one you want in Gameweek 19, 20, right?
Yeah. But I do want to counter the argument that you're sort of stuck. You're either stuck or you're sitting on 5 or 6 returns from KDB against Leeds and Everton. Like, let's not forget the first 2 fixtures are Leeds and Everton. City could easily score 6, 7, 8 goals in these games and you wouldn't be surprised. So that's the counter argument to it. And it's always a good bet to make.
Absolutely. We can't say that absolutely the KDB is a bad pick. That's just not possible. But I think what all of us, at least over here, we want to do is we want to keep the option open with an 8 million slot in our team and a premium slot. Yeah. Pick which way we want to go. Because like Bakar said, Foden is the goal scorer now.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a nice segue into the 8 million mid conversation. Because I think that's the spot where everybody, at least on Twitter, is differing in terms of where they are. I mean, it's a spot where I haven't quite made up my mind in terms of where I'm going to go. It'll probably be closer to Saturday or Sunday where I'll make that decision. But Bakar, where are you at with that spot at the moment? Do you have an 8 million mid in your team?
I have Mount in my team, but that's only because I'm not sure whether Foden will start. If I had slightly more assurance as to Foden's availability and his expected minutes, then I would go with him. But I'm more confident on Rashford versus Martinelli than I am on the 8 million mid debate, to be very honest. I mean, there's Kulusevski, there's Mount, there's Foden. I would rank them. I think Foden is the best, then Mount, and then Kulusevski in that order, personally.
Saka is a part of the conversation too. There's no reason for him to not be a part of the conversation.
Agree. And Maddison.
Yeah, Maddison's problem is the first 2 pick fixtures. And while Saka, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not a huge fan of Arsenal's opening fixtures, which is what puts me off him.
You right at the moment you rate the other 3 higher.
Yes.
What was your order again, Bakar? What was your?
I
other
think
one?
Saka's. Yeah, Foden, Mount, Saka, Kulusevski, that Madison.
Okay.
That's the order.
See, the thing with Foden is, as of now, we are recording on the 20th of December. He's not even back in Manchester, let alone join training. Grealish is somewhere being a golden retriever in New York, visiting all the Home Alone spots. So I don't think he's going to just throw them into the team right away, right? Because Pep values the guys who've been there. You have Mahrez, who's been there the entire preseason, etc. So while I like Foden,
But who's
and
going to play on the other wing? Who's going to play on the other wing?
Pep can do anything.
They've got Haaland and Mahrez.
Pep can
do anything, but everybody else has gotten out at the same stage. Whether you're talking about Bernardo, whether you're talking about Foden, there isn't a starting 11 player who got out earlier, is the point I'm trying to make.
Correct. And my point is, you give them all minutes to bring them up to speed over the next two games, Leeds and Everton, because then after that is when the difficult games start.
Yeah. Because I mean, their only other option is, who do they have? Palmer? Who are they going to play on the wing? No. So surely Pep throws in one of the guys who hasn't had much training into the mix, right? Because Haaland and Mahrez are the two that have been there. Nobody else has been there. Everybody else was playing until the quarters. Even Bernardo Silva, who could play on the wing, and Grealish and Foden. These are your three options for the other side on the wing. There's nobody else there. Alvarez isn't going to play because he was in the final and won the World Cup. So, I don't think you can rule out the fact that Foden could be thrown into the mix Gameweek 17 because nobody else is there.
I'm not ruling it out, but then 17 is fine. But then what about 18? What about 19? I like to see at least two starts. If I see one or two starts consistently, then I'd feel a bit more confident going there.
Yeah, that's fine. The point that I wanted to make here is that we don't know who's going to play on the other side of the wing if you're counting Mahrez as one option. That's all.
So where I am on the 8 million debate, right? I'm struggling to pick two midfielders between Almiron, Rashford and Martinelli. And instead I'm thinking just go with all three of them and leave money in the bank to find out who is the best 8 million mid to go for. But the caveat with that is I feel like I'm booking in a lot of transfers because I'm also starting with Salah. And to switch to like KDB, but then it's sort of the same transfer. I might end up going Foden, so that's not necessarily a valid argument. But if you ask me today, Foden I think wouldn't even make the top three because of the uncertainty regarding the minutes over there. So I would probably put Mount quite reluctantly, because I'm just not very confident. Probably Kulusevski in second, Saka in third, Madison fourth.
I mean,
there's Anthony to mention as well. We haven't spoken about Anthony.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but Sof, I just wanted to counter an argument. Like, objectively, it's just a fixture play because there's no world in which you're picking Mount over Saka unless you're talking about fixtures and doubles, right? Like, if you're comparing apples for apples, Saka's the better pick. He's the superior pick. He's on penalties for Arsenal.
And for Chelsea, the thing
trying to debate this.
I totally agree. And again, I'm looking at Chelsea's game as Fulham plus 2 points. I don't think we're going to get jack shit against Man City. So I'm looking at it purely as playing three promoted teams back to back and Mount being a flat track bully.
Fair enough. And it's worth having this conversation also because I haven't made up my mind with regards to this spot. Like, you boys made a really good point about Kulu not being a goal scorer and the fixtures not being that great. I mean, Bakar, I shouted out Anthony on the previous spot as well. And if you're somebody who's going with Rashford and Mitro up front instead of Marshall, I think Anthony is as good a placeholder as any. Especially with Forest, Wolves, Bournemouth, there are fixtures to chase there. And I think he's a good pick. I think there's a lot of scope to be creative with this spot. Like, I was thinking about this today, because I haven't made up my mind. I'm like, why not even Mahrez? Like, because there's Leeds and Everton, the games there to chase are there. And you're pretty confident that Leeds as a game is there to chase. That's an option. Zaha scored a brace in preseason, and which included a penalty goal as well. And he was asked about penalty taking duties. And he said, I'm not going to bow down out of taking penalty duties. So it's up to the manager, but I'm up and willing to take the penalty duties. So, and he's got a good two fixtures, Fulham and Bournemouth. Those are fixtures worth targeting. So I think maybe going with a fixture is an option here. Another thought that I had while thinking about this position is Maddison's second fixtures. If you think Liverpool are going to improve as a defense, the toughest fixture, which is Liverpool away. Outside of that, Maddison has Newcastle at home, Fulham at home, Forest away, Brighton at home, Villa away. That's a good line of fixture. And you don't really mind that Liverpool away fixture in 18, even if you want to bench him. The big factor here is Andreas Pereira plays Southampton at home in Gameweek 18. So I feel like there's scope to be creative with this position, especially if you're thinking about playing Andreas in that game. And Zoff, we were talking about this before we got on, and you said that you might actually need Andreas anyway to come on as a sub, but it's just a thought to factor in when you're making these decisions.
Agreed. And why I said that, because in case people don't know, Mitrovic is something that's a very interesting dilemma as well. He's currently on 4 yellow cards. The threshold now resets after 19 games, with all teams having at least one game postponed. It's now game week 20. So 3 things can effectively happen with Mitrovic. Game week 17, he gets booked. He misses game week 18. He then becomes a captain option for the double in 19. Now, let's say he doesn't get booked in 17. He gets booked in 18. He misses the first game in 19. Becomes a bit of a rubbish asset then. Or he doesn't get booked at all, and you can't captain him, because if he gets booked in the first game of 19, he would miss the second game. So it's a very tough one over there with Mitrovic. And I know, LR, you were talking about possibly going against him with Marshall over there.
But I don't want to segue into that just yet, because I think that midfielder conversation sort of needs a conclusion in terms of where we are at the moment, because process in the chat and telling us that Saka is the boring but the right option if you're looking at XG data for the teams as well. Where are you? Because I want to come closer to making up my mind, and I think being creative, maybe punting in this spot might be the right option.
I like getting somebody like Odegaard. There's something about Odegaard I'm getting good vibes about, and possibly leaving money in the bank. Because it comes down to an argument over here. He's got pens. And there's generally an argument for like good asset versus fixtures. Generally, a good asset will deliver even in bad fixtures. And just like, a bad asset will not necessarily deliver in the good fixtures in certain case like Mount. So I think that's where really you can oppose and be creative, like you said.
There are 2 points I'd like to make here regarding the discussion we're having. LR, on Mahrez, the only problem with Mahrez is that, for example, if we don't think that Foden is looking like he's secure for minutes later, then how do you get to De Bruyne, right? If you have Mahrez, the third City spot becomes tricky. Then you can't go to Salah and De Bruyne. And Zoff was saying that if he starts with
that's a good
Martinelli,
point, Zoff. Bucker.
And Zoff was saying that if he wants to buy all 3 of Martinelli, who else was it, Zoff? Rashford and Almiron, right? Almiron. Yes, then you will have to book in, let's say, that would be another transfer book. I don't think that's another transfer book, because regardless, you will want one City player as the third one, right? It will be either Salah to De Bruyne or one of these to Foden. So I don't think that is an argument that applies over here.
Correct.
Yeah, I think the conclusion that we come to...
That logic that you have of picking those 3 players and then moving to whoever you think is best is perfectly viable. But my counter argument is that I think that Saka is better than Martinelli, so why not begin with Saka then in that case?
I mean, I'm coming around to that in terms of if you're picking the safe option who's going to get you points, who's a good pick at that price point, I think Saka and Maddison are the guys you want to go for. If you're somebody who's willing to roll the dice and wants to chase points and look at some explosive assets, then you look at somebody like a Mahrez or an Antony. I think that's where I am by that position.
Would you pick Saka alongside Martinelli or by himself?
Yeah,
I think that's too much. I think that's too much personally. With the
I know you're going to make the eggs baskets thing, but we're talking about the fixture play. Is it a sort of thing like, you think Saka is a better option, you can discard Martinelli, or would you be okay with going both? Because the thing with Martinelli, and I think Bakar posed this question
Saka is a better option. When you
go ahead, Bakar.
When you look at the data, Saka is much better. So
I agree, and we have the data.
I'm just saying Saka is a better pick according to the data.
I totally agree.
Just also one of those things where I don't think data matters, Bakar, because I mentioned this on the draft where the chat where Zoff and I were discussing our drafts. We don't actually know how Arsenal are going to function without Jesus. It could just be that Nketiah is hogging all the shots. It could be that Saka is getting the bulk of the chances. We don't know what Arteta has in mind in terms of how he's planned to set up. For all Vieira could be a pick. We don't know that. So, because I think Jesus is that vital a cog, and I don't think he's just going to replace Jesus to Nketiah. Yeah, they've got some similar quantities, but they're far off as players. So we don't know what's going to happen with Arsenal attack, which is why you can't take that much into conclusion where, Saka is going to be a better pick. So, and so talking about when it comes to Martinelli and Saka, in my head, I'm very comfortable, and I think I'm happy to go Rashford over Martinelli. So for me, it doesn't become a part of that conversation at all, because I think I made my decision already. I'm going to go Rashford over Martinelli. That isn't a question for me.
I got what you're saying. But the thing with Martinelli for me is a known quantity, which I don't know if I want to get rid of yet. And it's not as much as a value. There's not necessarily a reason to sell him. And like you said, they're an unknown. He might turn out to be the best option if instead, like, because we talk, instead of Nketiah getting minutes up front, he might give Martinelli minutes up front. So I just want to go with the devil I know for now and be flexible with that.
That's fair.
The thing is, LR, as you said, that yes, we don't know how Arsenal would set up without Jesus, but wouldn't you want to go with the guy with pens?
Yeah, I know, but
especially when you can afford both of them.
With Arsenal, because of the fixtures, because I'm not confident in terms of how good they'll be without Gabriel Jesus, I'm happy to wait 2 or 3 games to just make sure I'm jumping on the right asset. And I'm willing to play the waiting game. If you're talking to me about instinct, before we start Gameweek 17, in my opinion, the pick I want to go for is Saka, because of the comfort blanket of the penalties that you mentioned. And the second thing in my mind is that Nketiah could actually be the pick if he's funneling the chances like he did at the back end of last season as well. So that's the thing where I'm just happy to play the wait and watch game. I'm Odegaard curious as well. So I don't want to commit to an Arsenal attacker just yet. That's where I am.
Fair enough. Anything more on the 8 million mids?
No, I think we can move on.
We've covered extensively.
Let's go back to the Mitrovic question. The whole yellow card thing is quite interesting. Can you go without Mitrovic?
I don't have Mitrovic in my draft at the moment. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot, because what's worrying me is the Southampton at home game. But then I was thinking about how I'd have played the game 3 or 4 years ago. And if the fixtures are there for a team like United, and a 6.5 million asset is there with the first 3 fixtures having 2 home games against Forest and Bournemouth, like 10 out of 10 times I would have just picked Martial, made the bet. And it's also 2 or 3 other things. It's also the yellow card thing that's playing in my mind. Also, Mitrovic's fixtures after Southampton at home aren't that great. Yeah, you have to keep in mind that Fulham are attacking everybody, no matter whether they're Man City or Arsenal or United or Chelsea. But the fixtures are Leicester away, Chelsea at home, Newcastle away, Spurs at home, Chelsea away. Like, those are 5 all right fixtures. So it is a place where I'm willing to roll the dice. It's sort of like a semi-bluff, hoping he loses his head, gets a yellow, and nobody has him in the double. But
yes, Pranil, but United also have City and Arsenal in 20 and 21. So the argument applies to Martial as well.
Yeah, fair enough. But the thing is, objectively speaking, all of us that are on a 6.5 to 7 million forward, by the time Game Week 20, 21, 22 arrives, I think that position, all of us are going to diverge to Nketiah. If things go as planned and Arsenal have the double in 23, whether it's Mitrovic or Martial, we're going to shift to Nketiah is what I'm thinking at the moment.
Pranil, are you sure that Martial starts all 3 of 3?
I'm pretty confident Martial starts the first 2, because it's a Tuesday, Saturday turnaround. And I don't think it's that different. And then if he's firing and performing, a lot of people have said he's injury prone, but I keep banging the same drum. A player is fit until he's injured, no matter what the history. Because I've seen FPL managers suffer a lot in the past, having the tag of injury prone associated with somebody. You could spin the narrative and say that he's actually had one of the best months in terms of prepping for Game Week 17 as well. It's how you want to spin the narrative. And I'm just willing to roll the dice. I believe in the player and the team and the fixtures.
It comes as a big shock to me bigging up Manchester United, but I didn't expect that.
I'm not always bullish, and so come on, you have to say it's not just the bias. I have hit the United spots fairly consistently in the past as well, right? It's not about just
you have, but ultimately it's like I'm concerned
more often than not, actually.
More often than not, but there's definitely, I would ask our viewers to just take.
There is a bias.
There is a slight bias. So somebody who's watching the first time, just take a note of that.
Yeah. And especially when it comes to Martial, he's one of my favorite FPL players of all time. So it's just, you got to do things that make you happy when it comes to FPL.
And you should. Absolutely, you should. Yeah. I just want everyone who's watching, we might have a lot of first-time viewers. They should be aware of that.
Yeah. Agree.
Where else do we go?
We do have an agenda. I think there's one last thing. Are you tempted by Somerville at all, or Andreas?
Zoff, are you set on Mitrovic?
Yes.
What are your thoughts?
Yes, I'm quite set on Mitrovic. I don't see him going anywhere.
Yes, I think the double and the Southampton fixture are too good to pass up. I'm likely going to be in this similar boat.
Ras has asked a very interesting question. He's in the chat. If no Mount or Mitro, who are you capping in 19? Kepa or Andreas? Firstly, Reece James is an option. And secondly, 17 and 18 are going to give us some bits of information in terms of Chelsea attackers or defenders who might become option. I don't think we can ignore the value of data that we're going to gather in the first 2-3 game weeks as well, where there might be a punter who might emerge as an exciting captaincy option. So you keep your mind open there. I mean, and if nobody emerges as an option, if Mitro's banked a hat trick against Southampton, then the
You roll
Mitro
the dice.
to
You just hope he doesn't get booked.
no, or the Marshall to Mitro, like if somebody like me who's
Yes,
betting
okay.
on a Marshall, the Marshall to Mitro transfer is one transfer away. I don't think it's that big a deal.
Absolutely. But
Yeah.
let's talk
And
about
that's
Go ahead.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons I just want to segue into that, because we do have Darwin as a 9 million striker and Oba's 8.7. That price point is something that's in my mind when it comes to, like, if Oba shows a hint of form, if he's showing like he's playing well, he's the focal point of Chelsea's attack, I'm happy to roll the dice on a double for somebody like an Oba, game week 19. We don't know what's going to happen in the first 2-3 game weeks. Trent might just return as the asset he was for the past 3 years. You don't know that. And that's something we don't know what we don't know.
What I wanted to mention about game week 19, we keep saying it's a double. I would just emphasize again, it's Fulham away plus 2 points. It's not a great defensive fixture for Chelsea because you expect them to concede at Fulham and you expect them to concede against City as well. So if you want to go for a single game week player that week, I know Haaland plays Chelsea, so that's slightly out of the equation. Who does Salah play that week in 19?
Salah plays Brentford away.
Not bad. It's not a bad fixture.
Yeah. United play Bournemouth at home.
United play Bournemouth at home. It's very much an option over there as well. So I don't think, again, this comes back to the double game week thing. A game week a fixture at home against City, I don't see it as great for for a Reece James especially, because even Fulham, we probably will win, we probably score, but do you expect us to keep a clean sheet at the Cottage? It doesn't feel very likely to me.
Yeah. Flappy's on the Flapjacks in the chat. He's talking about that's why you start with Bruno. Which is why you can jump on Sterling.
Or you can just or you can keep the money in the bank for flexibility. That's either way, that can go.
Yep. Yeah, and I think closer to game week 19, we'll know who the assets maybe to punt on. Maybe it's just easy and it's a 5.6 million Pulisic that becomes an option. Just don't know yet.
Let's touch upon Darwin. I know we didn't mention upon him before we move on to the Andreas versus Somerville thing. Easy pick?
Yeah, very comfortable with that pick. Especially with Jota and Diaz not going to be back until February. It almost feels like it's stupid to pass on him as an asset.
Same boat, Bakar?
Yes. Nothing more to add.
Yeah, not much to add because we discussed him also.
But the one great point that Ivan made is that Thiago's on it as well. And him clicking is a big deal for Liverpool clicking also.
Correct.
He looks sharp and that makes a difference in that Liverpool attack, which is why I'm happy to just go with Salah and Darwin.
Right. You had mentioned something on Andreas versus Somerville. It's Andreas all day for me.
Yeah, same.
I think Bakar also must be on the same.
Yes, for the double as well. And we have Almiron and game week 19. Almiron has Arsenal away, so that's an easy substitute that we have. Andrews waiting on the bench to come in for him. I simply don't see any reason not to have him.
Yeah. Right. Also, lots of people have been mentioning this in the chat. It's worth mentioning. I do think Bruno Fernandes is on pens for Man United, but against City, when Marshall took the pen, Bruno was on the pitch.
Did Marshall win it?
Yes, I think so. He scored a goal earlier. Yeah. But it's worth mentioning as a piece of information out there. That's all.
Definitely. Cool. Should we look at the chances created numbers from Fantasypedia?
Sure. Wow. Now we're talking about game week 17 alone as a fixture. Wow. So we're there. We're almost there.
Right. So looking at West Ham's weaknesses, they're quite weak down Martinelli's side. So it's 55 chances down that side.
Yeah.
West Ham are an interesting one. They actually finished the first half. I keep saying the first half of the season quite poorly. I think a lot of people were asking for Moyes to leave, and they look at the position, they're in the bottom 5. So it's going to be interesting to see how West Ham are going to be in the first few weeks.
But generally, in the London games,
the fixtures improved as well, Zoff.
No, correct. But my point is that even at home against home to Leicester, they looked abysmal. In general, the crowd went quite against Moyes. They're not very happy, even though they're doing well in the Europa Conference. West Ham are definitely a wait and watch, and they're a team too. I know that. I think we looked at the XGC numbers in the top 3 or top 4. They weren't performing like that towards the tail end. But again, we don't know what sort of West Ham are going to turn up. They've signed a new Brazilian defender. I think he's going to be joining only next month though, not this festive schedule.
But you can still accept defensive stability from a Moyes team.
Yeah.
That's just what you expect. Yeah.
Especially away to Arsenal, he's going to park the bus.
Yep.
Now, Leicester's weakness is on their right-hand side. So Newcastle's left. I think Almiron plays on the right, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
So on the left, I think that's ASM side.
ASM who had a knock, so it could be Joe Linton again.
There's some Eddie Howe's press conference yesterday was interesting because Almiron didn't play the last friendly versus Vallecano. They asked him about his availability, and he pulled a classic Pep. We wait and see. So I think that game
It's
is
a classic
today.
how.
It's a classic how too as well.
Yeah.
So let's see those numbers over there. But I think Almiron minutes wise, he's one of the first names now on the team sheet. We really don't need to worry there.
Yep.
Now, Leeds. Now, the Leeds game is an interesting one because the Marsh ball generally works better against the big teams. Leeds fans, even when you speak to them, you see the forums, they feel much better against the bigger teams. How do you think this game is going to pan out? There are some issues. I think Adams is missing. Meslier is a doubt with glandular fever. It's not necessarily out.
Yeah. I'm pretty confident of 3 or more goals for City.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if they didn't score a lot of goals in this one. And Leeds were struggling before the World Cup as well. They conceded like 13 goals in their previous 5 fixtures before the World Cup. And generally over the course of the season, their numbers have been fairly abysmal, almost like they were under Bielsa, their defensive numbers. So I'm very confident on a City win.
It is a conversation to be had though, because do you think because it's natural that the bigger teams had fewer players at the World Cup. So do you think the core of the squad being in place for the lesser teams might be an advantage, and we might see the gap shrink a little between the big teams and the teams below who had especially in the first 3, 4, 5 game weeks where, fixtures are getting played fast and the teams have trained together for a longer period. Do you think that might be a conversation or a thing?
That is a macro point to discuss. Now, how are the players who have been at the World Cup, are they sharper? And there are 2 groups of players. You have the guys who have been getting consistent minutes, and you have the guys like Martinelli who have been sitting on the sidelines. Are they going to be less or more sharp than the guys who have been chilling now? Haaland's been in Marbella and all that stuff. We're not talking about Haaland, but similar. And you have the other guys who just been training for 2-3 weeks now. No matter what it is, you're not going to be training with the same intensity if you're in Qatar. There is definitely going to be some level of drop off there, but you might be fresher, you might be less sharp. It's all very unknown.
Yeah.
It's all very subjective.
Yeah. For me, more than match sharpness, it's about team chemistry. Vieira had the chance to work with his entire squad for 2.5 weeks, which hasn't been the case with an Arsenal or a City or a United. I want to know if you think that might become a factor, not the sharpness. It's about having to train with the full squad so they can actually work on tactical things as a unit.
Like Emery. I totally agree in terms of Villa, for example. I think he's going to make a big difference because Emery is big on tactics. He's had only a couple of players who's been at the World Cup. You have Wolves, the new manager. He has also had a lot of time to work. So I think it is going to make some sort of difference.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see. Cool. That's why I'm very happy jumping on double Liverpool attack, because everybody who's going to be playing in that first team is pretty much there. Out of the big teams. They're the least affected.
I'd agree with that. Looking at now Manchester United's numbers against Forest, and I think you'll like this. 66 chances created down the center, conceded down the center for Forest.
Yeah,
just hope. Yeah, very comfortable with this. And I'm happy to.
Wayne Hennessy in goal.
Exactly. I just have to hope I don't end up captaining anybody but Erling Haaland Gameweek 17. That's all.
Yep. Now Chelsea again, Bournemouth quite weak down their flanks, and we've seen that they're a very narrow team. They like to pack the center and they give you a lot of space down the wings, and we don't have any aerial threats who are going to really feed off a lot of those crosses. But this is good for James. You can expect James to get forward a lot.
Correct. Guys, by the way, if you're wanting to look at this data, you can find them at the rate Fantasypedia. Every week they do this thread with these chances created, which are helpful in terms of matchups, etc. as well. So yeah, cool. So we'll go down to our teams now.
Right. Before we do that, let's do a Discord and a like and subscribe plug.
Sure. So, as you guys already know, many times we mentioned that we have a pretty active and grown Discord community. I think there's about 200 plus people in there now. And as we mentioned earlier, it's the best time to join us because it's 6 days now to the Gameweek 17 deadline. Since the last 2 or 3 days, the chat has become very, very active. And you don't join the Discord just to chat with us. The people on there are also very nice. And we'd love to have you out there. And if you want to join us on the Discord, you become a member either on YouTube or you support us on Patreon. All the content that we do remains free. It's just to hang with us and to support us. That's about it. And if you're in the chat, we've got a 650 strong crowd now. Make sure you're hitting the like and subscribe button. It really, really helps us. If you're on Twitter, please, retweet our pod, tweet what we do because it helps get the word out and it helps us.
Now, first up, our teams. Right, I'll go first. I would say I'm pretty set on maybe 11 of these, and I'll let you guys know which ones. I made a small change from the last draft. So Ward, Kepa in goal, White, James, Cancelo, Trippier, Patterson in defense, Martinelli, and I've got Kulusevski in there as a placeholder for the 8 million slot. Rashford, Andreas, Salah, Mitrovic, Darwin, and Haaland. I've got just 0.1 in the bank with this. So, like you said,
Just after this conversation, the chat that we had, who's in that Kulusevski spot?
Almiron.
Cool. You were saying?
Probably Almiron and Mount in that spot's probably the only one where I'm dithering. I quite like having Martinelli in there. I don't want to write off Arsenal just yet. I want to see what they're like. It's a good asset who's been good to me. I have some value tied up on him. I don't want to just chuck him in the bin just yet.
Fair shot. Which are your 4 non-locked positions as things stand?
Probably the Patterson spot. I don't know that the 5th defender, I've just put him in there right now as somebody who plays because we don't know about Neco Williams and the Wolves fullback Bueno. Probably that. Salah versus KDB. I think after our conversation here, it's probably going to be Salah. But if now, let's say Man City look much sharper, we have an entire round of Carabao Cup fixtures that is coming, right? We should mention that over the next 3 days. If City blow out Liverpool 4-0, 5-0, KDB looks absolutely on fire. That spot could change as well.
Yep.
That's about it.
And the Kulusevski spot. Cool. Whose team do we have next?
This is yours.
Can you read it out? I'm just a little behind on the stream.
Yeah. It's Ward and Kepa, White, James, Bueno, Cancelo, Trippier, Foden, Salah, Rashford, Andreas, Almiron, Darwin, Haaland, and Marshall.
1 second off.
So basically from my team, the one I showed above, you have Foden in as the 8 million guy. You have Bueno
My
and
sound
Patterson.
is off. I'm just putting on the speakers.
Yeah, so Bueno and Patterson is like pretty much the same thing. So you got Foden.
Can you say something?
Yes. Can you hear me? No, I think the audio might.
Hold on.
No problem. But yeah, it's
I'll go then.
Just
you guys can continue. I'll take a while to my sound.
Let me see if I might not have loaded your team, Bakar. Yes. I haven't actually loaded your team. Could you send it to me just 2 minutes right before? Hold up.
Of course. Always my fault off.
Always your fault. Yeah, I don't even have it in my downloads. True. I think you remember it, right?
Yeah, I have Kepa in goal, Ward as my sub. First 3 defenders are Cancelo, James, Trippier. Subs are White and Bueno. Midfield is Salah, Rashford, Mason Mount I have in my current draft. I'm not exactly sure whether I'll stick to him. I think I might go to Saka or even Anthony in that spot. Other than that, I have Almiron and Andreas. And up front, it's the same as usual, Darwin, Mitrovic, and Haaland.
So instead of Martinelli and Kulusevski in mind, who do you have? You have Mount and Almiron. Mount and Almiron, essentially 2 players different.
Rashford, yeah, you have Rashford, right?
I have Rashford as well, exactly. So Mount and Almiron versus Martinelli and Kulusevski.
Mount, Rashford, but I don't think I will keep Mount. I think I'll get Anthony or Saka.
I like that. I'll be very happy if you go for Anthony. I think it's a good punt.
I think that's a punt too far personally, but fair play.
There's a shout that he could actually just be the best attacker only because he's so trigger happy when it comes to taking shots. Absolutely loves to take shots, doesn't pass when he needs to also. So that could just work out.
Should we move on to a quick
Cool.
Q&A?
We've got a quick Q&A. We have a super chat from Nehal already. Is going Cancelo less worth if you can get KDB, Salva, Darwin, Haaland, James without Cancelo? Going against any City defense, at least early, worth it? What are your thoughts there, Zoff?
I have experimented with that setup. That's sort of like, that's what it, let's use something to add beside him of a 4.5 EM. What is that? Is that a 3.5 EM?
Shout out to Adam from Above Average FPL Pod after you said that.
I don't mind it necessarily, but the problem, what I like starting a season, and this does feel like a season restart, is price points. I want to have the option available to move to get a Cancelo or a Trent or a Robbo, etc. I like having an equal distribution of funds where I can get to players within one move. That doesn't allow it.
Fair enough.
And there's also the captaincy argument, right? And there's ultimately you're going to captain only one of them. So somebody like an Almiron has actually outscored KDB and Salah. So get the value while it's there.
Fair. Somebody's asking if the price rises are happening today. No, the price rises are happening only after deadline game week 1. So you don't need to worry about anything.
Game week 1. I love that you said game week 1.
Game week 17, yeah. Yeah, that's how it feels, right? That's how it feels.
It does. I've been saying it the whole season, like season starting, etc. I've been doing it all pod, so it's fun.
Yeah. Somebody's asking about Zaha and Kulu in that, or Madison, that spot for 8 million midfielders. We've been discussing it at length.
Now, Zaha, the problem is, as Baker mentioned on his pod, is Edward. I was a Zaha owner over the last few weeks, and with Edward in and out of the team, Zaha's role changes completely. And as far as I know, Edward is fit. So that makes Zaha a much worse option.
Yeah, but you like Zaha against Fulham at home. I just think that's a good fixture for somebody like a Zaha, a team that likes to play a aggressive front foot football that might leave space out for Zaha. So I don't mind that as a matchup alone.
Correct. But again, it'd be much better if he was playing up top, which you never know.
Yeah, which you don't know yet. What about Danny Ings? He sprang into form in the league, halted. Yeah, but I just think there are too many good forward picks at the moment to punt on Ings.
Fixtures are tough.
Somebody for a little
for Villa.
later.
I can't remember the fixtures right now, but they're tough for Villa.
Liverpool and Spurs up front.
Yeah, right there. And Emery's generally defense first.
Yeah. Just while we're talking about the 8 million midfielders, we might want Madison really, really soon, because he's actually somebody you can think of if you're not willing to switch that position, because 19 onwards, it's Fulham, Forest, Brighton, Villa. 4 good fixtures for Madison. We've got a super chat from Zaryab Khan. Bakar, you'll take this one. Wilson over Mitro if money is no issue. What do you think, Bakar?
I would go with Mitrovic. I think Wilson is a good shout. But just because of the double, I would go with Mitrovic.
I don't think
Wilson is fit.
Yeah, exactly. 3 games in a week always raises alarms for Wilson.
Yeah. Cool. I think we don't have that many questions, so I think we can wrap up here. We are not fully sure if we're going to be podding before the deadline. If some substantial news or piece of information come out in the next 2 or 3 days, then you might see us, you might not. If not, good luck for the season restart, and we'll see you soon enough. Any last words, boys?
Good luck.
It's been great chatting with you boys again. Glad to have FPL back, fully refreshed and ready to go.
Nice seeing you all, guys. Good luck.
Take care. See you, guys.
See you next week.